I drove 3 hours to get to my sister's wedding, carrying a carefully wrapped gift that cost more than I could afford. The moment I walked into the venue, I knew something was wrong. The coordinator, this woman with a clipboard and a frozen smile, took one look at my name and directed me to a table at the very back of the ballroom. Not near the back. The absolute furthest corner, behind a decorative column that blocked most of the view, positioned so that I was technically inside the reception, but might as well have been in another room. My family sat up front under crystal chandeliers, laughing at some joke I wasn't there to hear. My mother wore burgundy silk and diamonds that caught the light every time she moved. My father had his hand on my sister's shoulder, beaming like she'd just won an Olympic medal instead of landing a guy with a trust fund. And my sister, the bride, she glowed in her $1,000 dress, surrounded by bridesmaids in matching lavender who'd probably never even met me. I sat down at my lonely table, the only person assigned to it, and set the gift beside my purse. I could barely see the ceremony space from where they'd put me. The column blocked my view of the head table completely. I could hear music and laughter and champagne glasses clinking, but I couldn't see any of it. Just shadows and the backs of other guests' heads. Growing up, I was always the easy child. That's what my mother called me. Easy, independent, low maintenance. Pretty words that meant I could be ignored without guilt. My sister got the attention, the praise, the framed certificates on the wall. I got hand-me-downs and the smaller bedroom and whatever was left over after everyone else's needs were met. I found out when I was 16 that my mother kept a journal, one of those fancy leather-bound things, and every page was about my sister, her accomplishments, her struggles, her hopes and dreams. There wasn't a single entry about me, not one. When I asked about it, my mother said I was so independent that I didn't need the same level of attention. Like neglect was a compliment. The contrast between us was always brutal. She brought home trophies and boyfriends and college acceptance letters. I brought home decent grades and part-time job paychecks, and the quiet understanding that I would never be enough. She was the star. I was the supporting cast member who occasionally got a line or two if the script called for it. My parents would drive 4 hours to watch her volleyball games but couldn't make time for my high school graduation because they had dinner plans that couldn't be rescheduled. You can feel forgotten in a crowded room, and I felt that way in my own family for 18 years. I watched as a photographer arranged everyone for family photos near the front. My mother adjusted my sister's veil with such tenderness it made my chest hurt. My father shook hands with the groom's parents like they were closing a business deal. My sister laughed at something the maid of honor whispered, throwing her head back with that practiced grace she'd perfected over the years. Nobody looked toward the back corner. Nobody wondered where I was. Nobody cared. A server asked if I needed anything. I said no. What could she bring me? A seat at the actual family table? A family that remembered I existed? I clutched the gift tighter against my chest. This stupid, expensive present for a sister who'd just given me the clearest message possible about my place in her life. Behind a column in the back. That's where I belonged, apparently. That's where they decided I fit. My phone buzzed. A text from a cousin asking where I was sitting because she couldn't find me. I didn't answer. What would I say? That I was in witness protection seating? That my assigned spot came with a view of absolutely nothing? The music swelled somewhere up front. First dance, probably. I wondered if anyone would notice if I just left. Then I wondered if anyone had noticed I'd arrived. The cold from the air conditioning vent directly above me made me shiver. I hadn't brought a jacket because I thought I'd be sitting among people, in the warmth of family. Instead, I was in this forgotten corner, neither included nor excluded. Just there, the way I'd always been. That's when my sister appeared, weaving through tables toward me, still holding her bouquet, her dress rustling against chairbacks. She looked at me sitting there alone and didn't even pretend to be surprised. No apology, no explanation. Just this little smile that said everything. Guess they figured out where you belong, she said. I stared at her. This woman I'd grown up with, shared a bathroom with, drove to college visits with, back when I still thought we might be sisters instead of competitors. She'd won, obviously. She always won. But something about the way she said it, the casual cruelty of it, made something snap inside me. You look beautiful, I said. Because she did. That dress probably cost more than my car, and it fit her perfectly. She adjusted her bouquet, waiting for more. An apology. Maybe, for existing, for showing up and reminding everyone that she had a sister who wasn't good enough to sit at the family table. I hope you're happy, I continued. And I meant it. Not in a nice way, though. She narrowed her eyes, trying to figure out if I was being sincere or sarcastic. Before she could respond, Someone called her name from inside the ballroom. She gave me one last look, something between pity and contempt, and walked away. Her dress disappeared back into the crowd, and I was alone again at that isolated table. That's when I made the decision. Not out of anger exactly, more like clarity. I'd been carrying something for 3 weeks, something I'd prepared as a backup plan, and that moment with my sister made it clear I was going to use it. 3 weeks earlier, a woman contacted me on social media. I didn't know her at first, but she introduced herself as my sister's former best friend from college. They'd had some massive falling out years ago, the kind where both sides block each other and pretend the other person never existed. She'd been bitter about it ever since, apparently, because my sister had dropped her without explanation once she didn't need her anymore. Classic move. This woman, she'd kept things, messages, screenshots, evidence of conversations that my sister probably thought were long deleted. And one night, probably after too much wine and too much resentment, she sent them all to me. Dozens of screenshots showing my sister's real thoughts about her upcoming wedding, her fiancé, her carefully constructed life. The messages were damning. My sister talking about marrying for money, about how easy the groom was to manipulate, about her plans to get everything transferred into her name after the wedding. She called him gullible. She laughed about his devotion. She laid out specific tactics, crying on cue, playing vulnerable, making him feel like her protector. It was calculated in a way that made my skin crawl. The ex-friend sent these screenshots out of pure revenge, wanting someone in the family to know what my sister really was. And she chose me. Maybe she figured I'd be the only one who'd believe it. I'd sat on those screenshots for weeks, unsure what to do with them. Part of me wanted to delete them, pretend I'd never seen them, let my sister have her perfect wedding to her perfect rich husband. But another part of me, the part that had been shoved into back corners and forgotten at graduations and erased from family journals, that part wanted justice. 2 days before the wedding, I created an anonymous email account and sent copies to the groom's mother. I kept the subject line neutral, something she'd definitely open. Something like wedding day concerns from a well-wisher. Inside, just the screenshots and a single line that this might be information she'd want to see before the ceremony. No drama, no accusations, just the facts, laid out in my sister's own words. I didn't know if she'd opened it, didn't know if she'd believed it, didn't know if she'd do anything about it. Anonymous emails with relationship accusations could easily be dismissed as jealous ex-girlfriends or troublemakers. But I figured if she was the careful type, she'd at least look. That morning, before driving to the wedding, I'd prepared a backup plan. A silver gift box with a crystal picture frame inside, the kind you give newlyweds. And underneath that frame, tucked carefully beneath tissue paper, printed copies of every single screenshot, just in case the email wasn't enough, just in case I needed insurance. I wasn't sure I'd actually give it, but I packed it in my car anyway. Sitting in that back corner, after my sister's little performance, the decision became easy. I stood up, smoothed down my dress, and walked out to my car, retrieved the silver box from my trunk, came back inside and walked to the gift table. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even looked at me. I placed the box carefully among the other presents, made sure my handwriting on the tag was clear and perfect. Then I checked my reflection in one of the mirrors near the entrance. Still composed. Still elegant, even if my assigned table had been in that forgotten corner. Nobody followed me. Nobody called my name. I got into my car, drove out of the parking lot, and headed toward the highway. Behind me, the wedding continued. Music, dancing, toasts. My phone started buzzing before I'd gone 5 miles. My mother, then my father, then my mother again. I ignored them all. About 45 minutes into my drive, my phone absolutely exploded. Calls, texts, voicemails piling up so fast I had to put it on silent. I pulled into a rest stop and finally checked the messages. My mother's were frantic. My father's were angry. My sister's were unhinged, all caps, threats, and accusations. Apparently, the groom's mother had waited for the perfect moment to act on the information I'd sent her. According to the increasingly hysterical messages, she'd made some casual comment during the reception about wanting to see the gifts. My sister, always eager to show off, started opening a few for the nearby guests. The silver box was near the top of the pile, impossible to miss. My sister opened it in front of maybe 20 people, including the groom. She pulled out the crystal frame first, held it up, smiled. Then the screenshot slid out from underneath, falling onto the gift table where anyone could see them. The groom grabbed one before she could hide them, started reading. out loud apparently, because my cousin's text described him going pale and then red and then reading specific phrases that made everyone go silent. The groom's mother spoke up, cold as ice, according to my cousin's account. She said she'd received an anonymous email with these screenshots 2 days ago. She'd spent those days trying to verify if they were real, if this was some jealous ex trying to sabotage the wedding. She hadn't shown them to her son because she didn't want to ruin his wedding day over what might have been lies. But now, seeing identical copies appear as a wedding gift, she knew they had to be authentic. Someone was desperately trying to warn them. And judging by my sister's panicked face, by the way she was frantically trying to grab the papers back, everything in those messages was true. The ballroom didn't go quiet immediately. First, there were whispers. Then someone turned off the music. Then actual silence, the kind that feels like pressure in your ears. My sister tried to blame me, apparently, screamed about her psychotic sister who'd always been jealous. But the groom's mother shut that down fast. The messages were authenticated, she said. Dates, times, contexts that matched real events. They were clearly real. My sister couldn't explain them away. The groom kept reading screenshot after screenshot, his voice shaking. According to multiple frantic texts from various relatives, he looked destroyed. This was the first time he was seeing any of this. His mother watched him discover the truth in real time. Every manipulative message, every calculated plan, every joke about how easy he was to control. He'd had no idea. He'd loved her completely, trusted her entirely, and now he was learning that their entire relationship had been a con. My sister started screaming. The crystal frame shattered when she threw it. Guests were filming, of course. This was too good not to document. Her perfect wedding, her perfect scheme, all unraveling in real time under crystal chandeliers. My parents, according to my aunt's message, just stood there. What could they say? The evidence was right there in their daughter's own words. Impossible to deny. I sat in that rest stop parking lot, reading through the chaos I'd caused, and felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, no regret, just this odd sense of completion. My phone kept buzzing. More calls from my mother, trying to rewrite history now that the golden child had fallen. Messages saying they didn't know about my sister's character, that they were shocked, that family needed to stick together in times like these. As if they hadn't spent my entire life making it clear that family loyalty only went one direction. I deleted the messages without responding, started my car, drove the rest of the way home in silence. Just me and the highway, and the knowledge that I'd finally stopped accepting their version of reality. Not because they finally saw me, but because I'd made it impossible for them to pretend everything was fine. When I got home, I hung up my wine-colored dress, the one I'd worn to a wedding I wasn't really invited to, and booked a week at a coastal village in Maine I'd never visited. I didn't want their apologies or their explanations or their sudden interest in having a relationship now that the favorite had imploded. I just wanted distance, space, the sound of my own footsteps choosing my own path. My phone kept ringing. My mother left voicemails that got progressively more desperate, trying to explain away decades of neglect with a few panicked sentences. The first one was almost accusatory, her voice sharp with disbelief. How could you do this to your sister? To this family? The second was confused, claiming she didn't understand what had happened, asking me to call her back immediately to explain. By the third voicemail, she was crying, saying she'd always loved both her daughters equally, that she never meant to make me feel less important, that I was misremembering my childhood. That one almost made me laugh. 28 years of evidence to the contrary. But sure, let's rewrite history now that it's convenient. My father sent texts saying we needed to talk, like we'd ever really talked before. His messages were shorter, more businesslike, the way he handled everything. This needs to be handled. Call me immediately. Your sister is devastated. We need to discuss this as a family. The groom's family is furious. Do you understand what you've done? As if her devastation was somehow my responsibility. As if I'd forced her to plot and scheme and manipulate someone who actually loved her. As if we'd ever been the kind of family that actually discussed anything that mattered. My sister left a voicemail that was 50% sobbing and 50% threats, her voice cracking with rage and panic. She called me jealous, bitter, pathetic, a vindictive bitch who'd always wanted what she had. Said she'd sue me for defamation, get a restraining order, make sure everyone knew what I'd done. She promised to destroy me the way I destroyed her, to make sure I never showed my face at another family event. The irony was almost beautiful. She still didn't understand that I didn't want her life. I never had. I just wanted to not be treated like I didn't exist. And family events? I'd been barely invited to this one. Why would I care about being excluded from future ones? There were texts from aunts and cousins too, some supportive in that careful way people have when they don't want to pick sides. A cousin I barely knew asked if I was okay, said she'd always thought the family treated me differently. An aunt sent a passive-aggressive message about how family should stick together in difficult times, conveniently forgetting all the times they'd stuck together without me. Others demanded explanations, wanted to know if the screenshots were real, asked how I could humiliate my sister like that. A few relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions about my choices. I didn't respond to any of them. I packed a bag for Maine, threw in some books I'd been meaning to read, a journal I'd never written in, comfortable clothes that nobody had ever complimented or criticized. I set my phone to do not disturb except for work emergencies. My family could have their crisis without me. They'd managed to have birthdays and holidays and celebrations without me for years. They'd figure it out. The morning after the wedding, I made coffee and watched the sunrise from my apartment balcony. The city spread out below me in shades of gold and shadow, and my phone sat silent on the counter inside, weighted down with unread messages I had no intention of answering. The silence didn't mean I was invisible anymore. It meant I'd chosen peace over their approval. I'd chosen my own worth over their crumbs of affection. I thought about my mother's journal, the one with all those pages about my sister and none about me. I wondered if she'd write about this, about the wedding that exploded and the daughter who walked away. Probably not. I'd go back to being easy, independent, low maintenance. The daughter who didn't need attention. Except this time, it was my choice. This time, I was the one deciding I didn't need them. I thought about the Maine trip, what I'd do there. Maybe find a small bookstore in whatever town I ended up in. Walk on the beach in the early morning when nobody else was around. Eat dinner alone without feeling like I was missing something. Sit in a cafe without checking my phone every 5 minutes to see if anyone had remembered I existed. Just be, without performing, without trying to earn love that should have been freely given. The rental cottage I'd booked was right on the water, according to the photos. Small, weathered, probably drafty. Perfect. I'd wake up to the sound of waves instead of traffic. Read entire books in one sitting. Maybe start writing in that journal. Not about my family or the wedding or any of this mess. Just about what I wanted, what I actually liked, who I might be without the weight of their indifference pressing down on me. My neighbor knocked on my door around noon, asking if I'd heard about some scandal at a wedding. Something going absolutely viral on social media. Multiple videos, she said. Breathless with the drama of it all. I said no. Hadn't seen it. She showed me her phone anyway. Footage of my sister's meltdown. The crystal frame shattering against the wall. The groom walking out while guests gasped and filmed. It had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times already. People were taking sides in the comments, debating who was wrong, who was right, whether the bride deserved public humiliation, or the anonymous sister was cruel and vindictive for exposing her. Some commenters were calling it the most satisfying wedding disaster they'd ever seen. Others said it was staged, too dramatic to be real. A few people claimed to know the family, adding their own stories about the bride's behavior over the years. The algorithm had picked it up, pushed it to millions of feeds. My sister's worst moment was now entertainment for strangers eating lunch at their desks. I handed back the phone and said I didn't know those people. My neighbor gave me a strange look, like she didn't quite believe me but wasn't going to push it. After she left, I finished packing for Maine. I'd leave first thing in the morning, drive up the coast slowly, maybe stop in Portsmouth for lunch, find some quiet place where nobody knew my name or my family, or the drama that had exploded under those crystal chandeliers. The thought of my sister seeing those videos, watching herself become a meme, watching thousands of strangers judge her choices, should have made me feel something. Guilt, maybe. Satisfaction. Something. But I just felt tired. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about making sure that, for once, the truth was louder than their version of reality. That someone saw what she really was. That the groom didn't spend the next 20 years being manipulated before figuring it out. I thought about my sister telling me I belonged in that back corner. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn a place at their table, believing that if I was just good enough, quiet enough, successful enough, maybe they'd finally see me. But some families don't work that way. Some families decide who matters before you're old enough to understand the game, and nothing you do will ever change their minds. I remembered my high school graduation, how I'd bought my own flowers because nobody else thought to bring me any, how I'd watched other families take dozens of photos with their graduates, while mine left early to beat the traffic. My sister's graduation 2 years later had been different. A celebration dinner, a special gift, my mother crying with pride. Same milestone, completely different treatment. I remembered my 21st birthday, which they forgot entirely until I called to ask about dinner plans. My sister's 21st had been a surprise party with 50 guests. I remembered moving into my first apartment, carrying boxes alone while they helped my sister redecorate her dorm room. I remembered every Christmas where her gift pile dwarfed mine, every family photo where I was positioned at the edge, easy to crop out. The thing about being the forgotten child is that you spend so long making excuses for them. They're busy. They're stressed. Your sister needs more attention because she's more emotional, more fragile, more whatever. You convince yourself that you're fine, that you don't need what she gets, that wanting equal treatment makes you selfish or needy. It takes years to realize that no, actually you weren't fine. You were being neglected, and you were helping them do it by never complaining. Walking away wasn't weakness. Walking away wasn't defeat. It was the first act of self-respect I'd shown in years. I didn't need their version of love, the conditional kind that evaporated the moment you stopped being useful or convenient or easy to ignore. I didn't need a seat at their table if the price was my dignity. I could build my own table, set my own terms, invite people who actually wanted me there. I thought about what came next. Not just the main trip, but after that. The rest of my life stretching out like an unwritten book. Maybe I'd start saying no to family events instead of showing up out of obligation. Maybe I'd stop answering calls that only came when they needed something. Maybe I'd find friends who celebrated my successes instead of people who barely noticed them. Maybe I'd date someone who didn't understand why I was always bracing for disappointment. And I'd have to explain that when your family treats you like an afterthought. You start to believe that's all you deserve. Or maybe I just exist without the weight of their judgment. Go to movies I wanted to see. Take trips they'd find boring. Make choices that had nothing to do with earning approval I'd never get anyway. Live a small, quiet life that was entirely mine. That sounded nice, actually. Better than nice. It sounded like peace. The phone buzzed one more time. My mother, probably. Or my sister, alternating between rage and tears. Or my father, trying to play mediator now that the family's perfect image had shattered in front of 200 witnesses, and however many thousand people had watched the videos online. I didn't even look. Just picked up my packed bag, grabbed my car keys, checked one last time that I had everything I needed for a week away. Maine was waiting. A small cottage by the water, a week of silence and salt air, and nobody asking me to be smaller than I was. And after Maine, whatever I decided came next. A life I chose. Not one that was chosen for me by people who'd never really seen me anyway. That's where my story really begins. Not at that wedding, not in that back corner behind the column, not in the wreckage of my sister's perfect day, or the viral videos or the family group chat I'd be leaving tomorrow. My story begins the moment I stopped waiting for them to love me and decided that I was enough, all on my own. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who've convinced you that you don't deserve better. Sometimes the only way to stop being invisible is to remove yourself from the line of sight of people who refuse to see you. And sometimes justice doesn't come with apologies or recognition or closure. It comes with the quiet satisfaction of knowing you finally chose yourself.